The rain fell in sheets across the battlefield, washing the blood and soot into the jagged trenches that crisscross a landscape like open veins. The sky, bruised and electric, pulsed with low thunder, the distant echoes of orbital bombardments still rumbling in the atmosphere. Ethan Reyes presses back against a collapsed steel barrier, his pulse pounding in sync with the warning throb of the HUD inside his visor. The war had raged for 18 months, and though command swore the enemy's numbers were dwindling, the ground told a different story, one of ruin and attrition. He adjusted the power pack on his pulse rifle, the weapon's familiar weight oddly comforting. Around him, his squad moved with practiced caution, sweeping the remains of an alien comms relay they had destroyed 2 hours prior. Burnt fragments of foreign technology still crackled with residual energy, leaving a static taste in the air. "They're pulling back again," Sergeant Vallon muttered, scanning the perimeter with narrowed eyes. Something's not right. Ethan didn't answer. He'd stopped expecting things to make sense long ago. The alien invaders, no one even knew their true name, had appeared without warning, their biometal ships blotting out the sun over major cities. First contact lasted 12 minutes before the first bombardment began. A sharp sound cut through the rain. Not mechanical. Not human. Ethan's rifle snapped up instinctively, but the motion froze as he caught sight of her. She was crouched beneath a shattered support beam 20 meters ahead. Tall, ethereal in appearance, her silver skin shimmered even through the grime, and her long platinum hair clung to her body like strands of light. Armor, unlike anything Earth had ever crafted, covered her frame, elegant, seamless, built for a different kind of war. But what made him pause wasn't her appearance. It was the blood. She was injured. Badly. Her left side oozed a dark blue fluid that steamed where it met the cold air. One arm hung limp. Her eyes, an eerie shade of violet, locked onto his with intensity. There was no aggression in her posture. Only pain. Only wariness. "Contact, North Quadrant." Vallon barked over comms. Ethan didn't respond. His breath caught. He should have called it in. He should have taken a shot or marked her position for a drone strike. But he didn't. She wasn't a soldier anymore. She was dying. Her gaze shifted briefly to the squad approaching from the east, then back to him. She shook her head once, barely a movement, and placed a single hand over her chest. A gesture, not military, not strategic, almost pleading. Negative. Ethan said suddenly over comms. False reading. Just shrapnel echoes. Areas clear. Vallon grunted a curse, then moved on, leading the rest of the squad to a collapsed ridge to the south. Ethan remained behind, silent. He stepped forward slowly, his rifle lower but ready. The alien woman didn't move. As he reached her, she blinked, as if surprised he hadn't raised his weapon. Up close, he could see the fine patterns etched into her armor, glyphs, perhaps. Language. He holstered his rifle. "You're not one of them," he said, even though she wouldn't understand. "Are you?" She tilted her head. Then, with great effort, she lifted her good hand and touched her own temple. Her fingers glowed faintly, and a small projection flickered into existence between them, a three-dimensional map of the area, with glowing red markers indicating enemy factions. She gestured to herself, then to the map, and swept the red markers away. Ethan stared. "You're not one of them," he repeated, this time softer. A deep boom rocked the earth as a nearby artillery shell landed and the map vanished. She flinched, then groaned, a soft, haunting sound that made something in his chest twist. He couldn't leave her here. If the others found her, they'd kill her on sight. Orders were clear. No prisoners, no questions. Anything alien was a threat, but he didn't see a threat in her. He saw someone abandoned, hunted, and afraid, and he recognized the look in her eyes. He'd seen it in his own reflection after too many missions. Resignation. "All right," he muttered, scanning for cover. "Come on." He helped her up carefully, her weight surprising for someone so lithe. She didn't resist. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. Together, they moved into a half-collapsed bunker nearby, long abandoned, half-sunken into mud and ash. He laid her down gently and activated the med seal in his kit. It wasn't designed for alien physiology, but it stopped the bleeding At least for now. She watched him the whole time, silent, her eyes reflecting the dim light like mirrors. When he was done, she lifted her hand again, trembling, and placed it over his. Then she spoke, not aloud, but in his mind. "You spared me." The voice wasn't fully formed, more emotion than words, like the echo of thought through water. Ethan stiffened, his instincts screaming. But she didn't try to invade further. It was just a whisper, an offering of trust. He sat back against the wall, heart pounding. "I don't know why I did," he admitted, "but I couldn't just let them kill you." They remained like that for what felt like hours, though it was likely minutes. Eventually, her breathing slowed and her eyes closed. He didn't know if she was unconscious or sleeping. It didn't matter. He had done what he could. Outside, the comm crackled. "Reyes, report. You're lagging behind. What's your status?" He looked at her one last time. "No contact," he replied, moving to rejoin. By the time he emerged, the rain had stopped, replaced by a heavy mist that blanketed the battlefield like a shroud. The war would continue for a few more days, brutal and directionless. Then, as if some unseen switch had flipped, the enemy ships would vanish, and peace, such as it was, would be declared. But Ethan would never forget that moment in the bunker. The alien woman, her eyes, the way she said nothing and everything with a single glance. And 1 week later, he would see her again, not in battle, but at his doorstep, holding a gift that would change his life forever. The wind stirred the yellow grass outside Ethan Reyes' house, rattling the loose pane on the porch window, as it always did when a storm was on its way. He didn't bother fixing it anymore. Some things were better left broken. The war was over. That's what they said on the news feeds. Every screen, every channel, the same rehearsed line. Ceasefire effective immediately. Hostiles have retreated from all known sectors. There was no victory parade, no declarations, just silence, as if the world had collectively agreed to pretend it had never happened. Ethan had learned not to trust silence. His home sat alone on a forgotten stretch of land, nestled between an overgrown orchard and a gravel road that led nowhere in particular. It had belonged to his parents once, now long gone, swallowed up by the early strikes that took half the eastern provinces. Returning to it felt less like coming home and more like crawling back into a shell. He spent his days repairing old irrigation drones, rebuilding soil monitors, and tending to the hydroponic racks in the barn. It gave his hands something to do, kept the nightmares at bay. But the nights, those were harder. Sometimes he would wake with a taste of smoke in his mouth, his fingers clenched so tightly they left bruises on his palms. Other nights, it was her eyes he saw, violet and vivid, watching him from the darkness. He didn't know her name. He didn't even know if she had survived. But she had made an imprint, sharp and permanent, like shrapnel that refused to be pulled free. The world didn't ask what happened out there. No one came knocking for debriefs. The Earth Defense Force had quietly disbanded its frontline units within a week. Veterans were offered therapy modules and basic subsistence rations. Most refused the help. Trauma, it seemed, was easy to carry when it was yours alone. Ethan preferred it that way. People asked too many questions. He had developed a rhythm to his isolation. Mornings started with silence, coffee, and a check of the perimeter sensors. Afternoons were for labor, evenings for reading. Nights, if he was lucky, brought dreamless sleep. But lately, the rhythm had begun to break. It started with the lights, soft flickers in the barn's interior sensor array, subtle enough to dismiss. Then came the interference. The old satellite receiver, long dead, would click to life for seconds at a time, spitting out fragments of code in no language he could recognize. And once, just before dawn, he found one of the orchard's boundary drones twisted into the soil, bent inward as if pulled by some unseen force. He told himself it was residual damage, power surges, a misaligned solar bank. But deep down, he knew better. There were moments, quiet, disorienting ones, when he felt eyes on him. Not malevolent, not hostile, just present, as if someone or something was observing from just outside the limits of perception. He'd catch a movement from the corner of his eye, turn to find nothing but wind and trees. He kept the memory of the alien woman locked behind silence, afraid that speaking of her would make it all too real. But she lingered, stitched into the folds of his thoughts. There had been something in the way she looked at him, something that bypassed language entirely. Not gratitude, not fear, recognition. The skies were overcast on the seventh day. Ethan stood on his porch, staring across the field as the wind pulled at the tall grass in slow waves. A faint static hum drifted in the air, subtle and constant. His coffee had gone cold in his hands. Then the perimeter alarm chirped. Not the standard fault tone. This one was deliberate, a low, pulsing rhythm that signaled motion near the entrance gate. He frowned and set the cup down. No one came out here. He retrieved his pulse sidearm from the shelf inside the door, more out of habit than concern, and stepped onto the path that led through the orchard. The trees stood in rows like silent sentries, their skeletal branches swaying gently. The air smelled of ozone. As he neared the gate, he stopped. She stood there. The alien woman, not in armor, not wounded. She wore a fitted cloak, smooth and light, that shimmered like pearl in the muted sunlight. Her hair was the same, long, impossibly white, flowing down past her shoulders like a river of glass. She held a small, rectangular box in her hands, made of dark metal with a single gold clasp. Ethan stared. His fingers tightened on the grip of the pistol, then slowly relaxed. He holstered it and stepped forward. "You found me," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded once. There was no fear in her, no hesitation. She regarded him with the same calm intensity she had on the battlefield. Only now, there was something else in her eyes, a softness, a question, maybe. He opened the gate wordlessly and gestured toward the house. She followed without speaking, moving with grace, each step deliberate. At the porch, she paused, looking up at the old building, then at the sky. Inside, he cleared the table and motioned for her to sit. She placed the box gently between them and took her seat without a word. He waited. Her fingers touched the box, and the clasp clicked open. A soft blue light spilled out, forming a small, hovering prism above the surface. Within it shimmered a constellation of moving images, blurry at first, then sharpening. He saw himself, or rather, he saw what she had seen. His face streaked with dirt and blood, hands trembling as he applied the med seal to her side. The image flickered, shifted. Now it was the bunker, his hand in hers. The rain, the sound of battle in the distance. "This is yours," he asked quietly. She nodded again. "Why bring it here?" Her voice came, not in sound, but in thought, a careful projection, clearer than before. To remember, to honor. The images shifted again. This time, she was a focus. Her flight through the battlefield. The rogue faction, violent, merciless. A memory of defiance, of breaking ranks, of choosing to survive. "You changed the pattern," she said. "Your choice saved more than one life." Ethan swallowed. The moment pressed down on him like gravity. "So you're not one of them." She tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. Then she pointed to the floating prism, expanding it to show two diverging lines, one leading to a dark symbol, the other to a small point of light. "Not anymore." The words lingered, heavy with meaning. She had chosen him, for reasons he didn't yet understand. And now she had brought him a gift, not of thanks, but of purpose. The box hummed softly. The light began to dim. "Is this goodbye?" he asked. She stood, lifting the box and sealing it shut. Then she turned to the door, paused, and looked back at him. A faint smile ghosted across her lips, barely there but unmistakable. Beginning. Then she stepped outside, and before he could call after her, the wind rose, and she was gone. Ethan sat motionless at the table, his hands resting where the box had been. The house was silent again, but it no longer felt empty. Outside, the orchard swayed under the gray sky, and far beyond it, somewhere past the edge of the clouds, something had changed. Ethan found it difficult to return to his old rhythm after the alien woman's visit. The solitude that had once been a balm now scratched at him, raw and persistent. Her presence had ignited something in him, unspoken, undefinable, but undeniably real. In the days that followed, he walked the fields more than he worked them, his eyes drifting skyward, scanning for shapes in the clouds, movement in the trees. Each breeze brought a phantom echo of her voice, each creak of a reminder of her absence. He had tried to convince himself it was a one-time encounter, a gesture of closure, yet the memory of her final word, beginning, anchored itself in his mind like a stone at the bottom of a deep well. She hadn't come to say goodbye. She had come to set something in motion. A week later, the perimeter sensors triggered again. This time, he didn't grab the sidearm. He left the barn with nothing but a quiet urgency, boots crunching along the frost-hardened path as the early morning mist clung to the orchard. She was there again, not alone. Beside her stood a figure slightly smaller than herself, armored in the same biomechanical sheen, but lacking the fluid grace she carried. The figure stood still, unmoving, and Ethan realized it wasn't just youthful stiffness. It was fear. Its eyes, large and dark, flickered between Ethan and the woman like a child clinging to a parent's side in an unfamiliar world. Ethan stopped several paces away. "You brought someone." The woman nodded, her expression solemn. "He is mine." There was no need to ask further. Ethan's breath caught his throat as realization settled like snow, quiet, but heavy. "Is he?" He paused. "Human?" "No." Her answer came gently, not apologetic, simply truthful. "But part of me, part of what remains." The boy's eyes, wider than hers, stared at Ethan with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. He clutched something small, a sphere of light pulsing faintly with blue rings. Ethan didn't move. Why bring him here? The woman looked past Ethan, toward the farmhouse. "Because the storm is not over, only hidden." A chill trickled down his spine. He wanted to believe the war was truly over, that the ceasefire meant safety. But there was a certainty in her tone that stripped away comfort like peeling paint. "There are others," she continued, her voice projected more clearly now, "like those we fought, unbound by treaty, hiding among the ashes. They know what we did. They remember you." Ethan exhaled slowly. "They're coming." "Yes, not yet, but soon." He rubbed a hand across his jaw. "And you want me to protect him?" The woman's gaze softened. "No, I want you to teach him." The boy's eyes widened slightly at that. His posture straightened. There was an eagerness beneath his nervous shell, an untapped will, something Ethan recognized. "I'm no teacher," Ethan said. "You are." The certainty in her voice struck him harder than any argument could. He looked at the boy again. The resemblance wasn't biological. It was something deeper. The way he watched, listened, absorbed. The way he held his breath, as if waiting for permission to exist. "What's his name?" Ethan asked. The woman tilted her head. "He has not chosen yet. That is his right." Ethan nodded slowly. "All right then. Let him choose." She reached for the boy's shoulder, a silent gesture of reassurance, then stepped back. "I cannot stay. If they track me, they will find him." Ethan stiffened. "Then stay inside. Let me hide you." "It would not matter. I have burned too brightly." Her hand hovered over her chest. "They follow echoes." The boy stepped forward, just slightly, then turned to look at her. A conversation passed between them, without words. When he turned back, his gaze met Ethan's with new determination. The woman's voice returned, softer now. "He has your fire, not by blood, but by choice." Ethan glanced at the boy, then back at her. "And what if I fail him?" "Then he will still be better for having known you." The simplicity of it disarmed him. There was no prophecy, no grand design, just belief. That was all she offered and all she asked in return. Ethan extended a hand to the boy. "Come on, let's show you the place." The boy hesitated only a moment before stepping forward and taking it. His hand was cool, fingers thin but steady. Together, they turned toward the house. When Ethan looked back, she was gone. Inside, the boy walked with cautious interest, inspecting the living room with eyes that flicked from corner to corner. Ethan made space for him in the spare bedroom, cleared out the dusty storage shelves, and left a set of clothes on the bed, too big but usable. They didn't speak much that first day. The boy communicated mostly through gestures and facial shifts, but Ethan noticed a quick understanding in his eyes. He was learning everything: objects, behaviors, even language. By nightfall, he had begun mimicking Ethan's speech. Slowly, carefully. "Tool," he said, pointing at the wrench. "Window. Door." Then, after a long pause, he pointed at himself. Ethan crouched beside him. "You need a name." The boy nodded once. "You can choose anything." There was silence for a moment. Then the boy looked at the sky outside and whispered, "Ash." Ethan blinked. "Ash." The boy repeated it, firmer. "Ash. Like what's left." Ethan smiled faintly. "All right, Ash it is." Over the next few days, Ash settled into the routines of the farm with uncanny speed. He learned to calibrate soil sensors, to guide the irrigation drones with precise gestures, and to mimic Ethan's movements in the greenhouse almost perfectly. He didn't speak much, still unfamiliar with sentence structure, but the few words he used carried weight. Each day, his presence carved a place into Ethan's world, reshaping the quiet that had once felt so final. But with each sunset, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. It started again with the interference. Small distortions in the comm's relay, flickers in the perimeter feed. Then came the shadow. A flicker across the orchard, faster than the eye could catch. Ethan didn't mention it to Ash. He didn't want to spread fear, but he reinforced the defenses, rechecked the drone batteries, and kept the pulse sidearm within arm's reach at all times. One night, as he lay awake, he heard it. Not a sound, but an absence of sound. A silence too complete. He rose quietly and made his way to the control panel by the kitchen. The feed was static. All 4 cameras. A blackout. He turned to wake Ash, but found the boy already standing at the hallway's end, eyes wide, clutching the light sphere from before. "They're here," Ash said, voice low and certain. Ethan moved to the front window and looked out. Nothing. Only the trees swaying under a moonless sky. But deep inside, he knew. The storm had begun. The silence outside was no longer passive. It pressed against the house like a living thing, dense, intentional. Ethan held the sidearm low and steady as he crept past the curtained windows, careful not to disturb the edge of the pane. Ash followed behind him barefoot, his small frame tense but steady, the glowing orb in his hands pulsing faster with every step. Ethan stopped at the rear door and turned. "Stay close to me. If anything happens, you run. You hear me?" Ash nodded, gripping the orb tighter. They watch. Not near, but close. Ethan had no idea how the boy knew, but he didn't question it. Not now. They stepped onto the back porch, the boards beneath them groaning in protest. The air was cold, but dry. No storm, no wind. And yet, every instinct in Ethan screamed that this was the eye of something. He scanned the orchard. Nothing moved. The drones were offline, the cameras dead. The only light came from the orb Ash carried, casting a ghostly blue hue over the dry grass. Then he saw it, a shimmer, barely perceptible, like heat rising from asphalt. It moved between the trees, flowing rather than walking. Ethan raised a sidearm, but something told him it wouldn't matter. This wasn't like the raiders or mercenaries from the war. This was something different, calculated, predatory. Ash whispered something, too soft to hear. The orb flickered once, then projected a narrow beam toward the trees. Where it touched, the shimmer flinched. A shape solidified for a moment, tall, angular, with joints that bent in unnatural directions. No visible face, just a dark, chitinous surface and a faint humming that vibrated in Ethan's chest. Ethan fired. The pulse shot hit center mass. But instead of dropping, the figure folded backward, absorbing the impact like smoke through a vent. It hissed, low and guttural, before vanishing again into the trees. Ash turned to him. "One of many." "How many?" The boy raised 3 fingers. "Scouts, not full force." "Testing." Ethan exhaled, trying to calculate odds. The barn held an old fusion relay. The control box in the cellar had a limited EMP burst. Old tech, unreliable, but it might buy time. Still, he had no idea what these things were capable of. He took Ash's shoulder. "We can't stay out here. Come on." They retreated inside, locking the doors manually. Ethan guided Ash to the cellar hatch behind the kitchen, lifting the old steel panel and gesturing for him to climb down. The boy hesitated. "I help." "You'll help more by staying alive." Ash stared at him, something burning in his eyes. Then, reluctantly, he descended into the dark. Ethan sealed the hatch, bolted it, and turned back to the main room. Another shimmer appeared outside the window, closer this time. Ethan didn't fire. He waited. The creature didn't advance. It stood still, watching. Then it raised one arm and extended 3 long fingers against the glass. The message was unmistakable. They were coming. And Ethan had something they wanted. A loud crack echoed through the orchard, metal against wood. A fence post had snapped. Then another. The perimeter was being dismantled, methodically. He triggered the manual defense override. Floodlights surged to life, then blinked out one by one, like dying stars. He cursed under his breath and ran to the barn. Inside, the relay station buzzed softly, still charged. He activated the EMP sequence and set the count down. 15 seconds. Enough to knock out the scouts' cloaking systems, hopefully disorient them. He sprinted back to the house, heart pounding. 5 seconds left. He dove behind the porch railing just as the pulse went off. A low-frequency wave rippled outward, disrupting every electronic device in a 100-meter radius. The orchard lights flickered and died. The trees glowed for a heartbeat with static shimmer, then fell still. When Ethan looked up, 3 dark forms lay crumpled near the eastern fence, spasming in the grass. One tried to rise, its limbs twitching erratically. He moved quickly, crossing the distance in a crouched sprint. A clean shot to the base of the skull, what passed for a skull, ended its motion. The others he dispatched just as fast. The bodies dissolved almost immediately, breaking down into dust and vapor. He wiped his brow, adrenaline pumping, and turned back toward the house. Ash stood at the door, the orb now dim in his hand. "They will send more," the boy said softly. "I know." Stronger. Ethan stepped up onto the porch and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Then we get stronger, too." Over the next 2 days, they prepared. Ash proved to be more than a quick learner. He was adaptive. Every motion, every instruction Ethan gave, the boy absorbed and refined. They fortified the house with manual traps, reinforced the cellar door, rewired the barn's old comm relay into a directional scanner. Ash modified the orb, embedding it with fragment from the broken scout cores, somehow enhancing its sensory range. Ethan didn't ask how he knew to do it. He just accepted it. Some things weren't meant to be explained. The boy had been made for a world that didn't exist yet, but it was coming. On the 3rd night, the woman returned. No announcement, no shimmer. She simply stepped through the orchard as if summoned by thought alone. Ash ran to her without hesitation, wrapping thin arms around her waist. She held him close for a long moment, then looked up at Ethan. "They tested your resolve. You answered. They'll come harder next time." She nodded. "Yes." The scouts were not the danger, only the signal. Ethan stepped closer. "So what now?" She looked past him, toward the barn, the fields, the open sky. Then her gaze returned to Ash, who stood quietly between them. "Now you teach him to fight. I'm not a soldier anymore. No, you are something more dangerous." Her eyes glowed faintly. "You are a man who remembers." Ash turned toward Ethan. "I want to learn. Everything." There was no fear in his voice, only conviction. Ethan felt the weight of the moment settle over him, not as a burden, but as a purpose, the kind he hadn't felt since the battlefield. He nodded once. "Then let's begin." The woman placed her hand on Ash's shoulder, then looked at Ethan one final time. "I will draw them away. Buy you time." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You might not survive." "I already have." Her smile was small, enigmatic. "What comes next is for you." She turned and walked into the dark. Neither of them said goodbye. Ash stood beside him, watching the trees as silence returned once more. But this time it didn't feel empty. The storm was coming, but so were they. Ready? Together,